Good day. My name is Giriraj. Today we are going to discuss about DNS filtering. DNS filtering is one of the functionality of Cloudflare Zero Trust or Cloudflare One. Cloudflare has the ability to provision both IPv4 as well as IPv6 DNS endpoints. Cloudflare DNS filtering also supports DNS over TLS and DNS over HTTPS. In today's demo, what I'm going to demonstrate is we are going to use a free Cloudflare tenant using the free Cloudflare Zero Trust account. We will be configuring a shared DNS resolver in a specific network, and we will filter all the outbound DNS traffic through Cloudflare Zero Trust. If you are an enterprise customer, Cloudflare also has the ability to provision a dedicated DNS resolver for your organization or for your Cloudflare tenant. So these dedicated DNS resolvers are not shared between other Cloudflare customers. And lastly, if you have a home Wi-Fi router or a handheld device, you can use 1.1.1.1 as a free DNS resolver to protect your internet browsing in your home network or on your personal device, and it's absolutely free. Let's see behind the scene what happens. If a particular workstation or a network DNS traffic is forwarded to Cloudflare using a shared DNS resolver or a dedicated DNS resolver or using 1.1.1.1, Cloudflare closest edge performs a lookup of the website, and if the particular DNS traffic or the network is protected by a Cloudflare Zero Trust account or a tenant, then a allowed website will resolve to the actual IP address of the particular allowed website. Let's say, for an example, if a user or a network is protected by Cloudflare DNS filtering and you steer all the DNS traffic to Cloudflare, and assume that you have created a policy to block risky websites or blocked a specific cloud app or a URL or maybe a DNS query to specific countries, instead of resolving the DNS query to the actual IP of the web server, Cloudflare will return a specific block page IP, which means a bad website or a blocked website will not resolve to the actual IPv4 or IPv6 address. Instead, Cloudflare will resolve to a specific Cloudflare block page IP address so that the user can't access a blocked website or a risky website. So let's get into the demo. You could see that I've already logged into the Cloudflare Zero Trust dashboard, and the PC that I'm sharing on the remote session is connected to my home Wi-Fi router. So let's see what is my IP. It's 163.53.148.38, which is the public IP of my home network. This can be your corporate network, or in your case, your OT or IoT or a guest Wi-Fi network will make an outbound internet connection using a specific public IP. I'm gonna visit google.com, as well as I'm going to visit a website which belongs to gambling category, because my PC does not have any protection and it's going through my home Wi-Fi router. The websites are allowed. Now what I'm going to do is, there should be a specific way for my Cloudflare tenant to identify if a request comes from 163.53.146.38. all the DNS query should have a specific policy. How do we do that? Now Cloudflare has two ways to identify your corporate users or network. One, when you deploy the Cloudflare warp agent, we know who the user is, to which Cloudflare tenant you belong to. So it's easy for the closest Cloudflare edge to perform a lookup for the user and the organization and the policy and block or allow a transaction. But if you're trying to protect a guest Wi-Fi network or a OT or a IoT environment, or maybe a machines, kiosk machines, then Cloudflare identifies your network based on the public IP address. I'm going to create a network called home lab. As I mentioned earlier, like Cloudflare supports IPv4 IPv6, but for this particular demo I just enable IPv4 DNS because I'm using a free tenant. I've not purchased a dedicated DNS resolver, which is only available in enterprise plan. In this demo we'll be utilizing the shared DNS resolver, which means every Cloudflare Zero Trust customers will be using the same IPv4 DNS endpoints to steer all their DNS traffic. I'm not going to talk much about eDNS. Pretty much it's self-explanatory. It will resolve to the local location. I will also enable my home lab as a default DNS location. I'll explain you what is the purpose of this at the later stage. Let's click on continue. It looks like it's impressive. I think the browser picked up my public IP. Yeah, so I'm going to enable, so for now, like I'm not going to enable any authentication, but I'll just disable it for now and click on continue. Click on done. If you were to steer the traffic from, or if I need to steer the traffic from my home lab network to Cloudflare, I can simply configure 172.64.36.1 as a DNS resolver in my DHCP, which I'll be doing shortly. I can either use IPv4 or IPv6. In case if I need to steer the traffic to Cloudflare, especially the DNS traffic over TLS or over HTTPS, I can use the following endpoints. By this way, Cloudflare Edge knows the traffic is coming from my home lab and it is binded to my Trust Co Cloudflare Zero Trust tenant. Yeah, let's refresh and see if okay, here we go. We see the DNS lab location. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to configure 172.64.36.1 as a DNS resolver in my home router. So let's go to 192.168.0.1. I'm going to put the password under the advanced LAN settings, DHCP server. I'm going to use the Cloudflare DNS endpoint or Cloudflare DNS resolver to my, I'm going to push this to all my clients connected to my home Wi-Fi router. Click on save. What I've also done is, in order to save some time, under gateway, firewall policies, DNS filtering policies, I've created some basic policies to enforce Google search, to block adult and inappropriate YouTube videos. I've also blocked security risk categories like command and control, proxy anonymizer, so on and so forth. What I'm also going to do is, if you remember, like before we started the demo, I tried to access google.com and 777.com, both got allowed. If we go to radar.cloudflare.com, let's see what is the category of 777.com. If I'm not wrong, it should belong to gambling URL category, but let's verify that. Okay, here we go. All right, so the 777.com belongs to two categories, SIPA filter as well as gambling. Now what I'm going to do is I will add a policy to block gambling. Under the traffic criteria, we can block based on the cloud application category, authoritative server, country, domain, host, etc, etc, etc. But for this demo, I'm going to use the content category in. I'm going to search for gambling and I'm going to set the action to block. I'm not going to enable these options. Cloudflare DNS filtering also has ability to apply time-based policy in case if you would like to allow YouTube for 1 hour per day, or you wanted to allow on a specific dates, you can use policy duration or time-based policy, but I'm not going to enable it for this demo. I'll enable the block page. So if the user in my network tries to access a blocked website, we can serve them a block page. Please note when this option is enabled, the Cloudflare root certificate should be present on the user's workstation. Otherwise, the traffic will be blocked, DNS rules will be enforced, but the user will not get the block page. But if the user, there are two ways. One, you can push the Cloudflare root certificate through any captive portal or manually deploy it on the workstations. If it's a guest Wi-Fi, probably you may not be able to deploy the Cloudflare certificate. In that case, what happens is we will block the traffic, but the user may not see the block page. I'm also enabling the below settings. So what will happen is if somebody has a Cloudflare agent or the Warp client, we can show a block page notification on the user machine, because when you deploy Warp client, the SSL certificate can be baked as part of the Warp client installation. So I'm going to create the policy. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable my Wi-Fi and re-enable the Wi-Fi just to make sure that it gets the following DNS resolver. I'm going to enable the Wi-Fi and open a new window, go to google.com. Okay, google.com is open. I'm gonna go to 777.com. It's allowed, so probably my DNS setting is still not enforced. I'm going to recheck the settings on the router. Okay, I'll go to advanced DHCP. Okay, I'm going to connect to a different network and let me switch back to my other Black Spider network, because this home router connects to Black Spider SSID. All right, I'm gonna once again close the browser. Okay, maybe we can verify here. I'm gonna do a NS lookup. Google.com website is allowed, so it resolves to the public IP. Now I'm going to access 777.com. Let's see what happens. Interesting. It's still resolving to the public IP. Let's see what's happening. Let's go to the location. Okay, it's 172.64.36.1. That's correct. Now let's go to the policy. Under the gambling policy, gambling content category in gambling. Yeah, it's gambling. Action is block. Let's go to the home Wi-Fi router just to reconfirm 172.64.36.01. Okay. All right. Let me re-enable the Wi-Fi setting. All right, let's open up a new browser. 777.com is supposed to be blocked. Still not blocked. What is happening? Okay, maybe I'll open an incognito window just to make sure. It does not use any cached request. Okay, here we go. 777.com is blocked. Now let's open the terminal. We will also check if the google.com is working. is google.com is working. So if I do a ns lookup to google.com, you could see that it's resolving to the Google web server IP address. Now if we do ns lookup to 777.com, you could see that it's resolving to 162.159.36.112, which is the Cloudflare block page. And if you could see here, the user is displayed with the block page. Now, so as part of this demo, you can think probably in your perimeter device, in your guest Wi-Fi network, you can push the Cloudflare DNS Resolver, or maybe you can directly configure the Cloudflare DNS Resolver in the network adapter settings and steer all the traffic to Cloudflare, and you can enforce DNS filtering rules. Now, one of the major disadvantage of this approach is any DNS query comes from this particular public source IP, we will apply a flat policy. Now let's assume that you have a corporate network with a mix of user and servers, and you want to apply a different set of user policy for users and different policy for the machines behind this public IP. How do we do that? It's very simple. I have a workstation, Windows workstation with the warp agent deployed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to google.com as well as 777.com and see what happens. I don't have any security on this workstation, so what I'm going to do is, it's allowed, so I'm going to enable a warp agent. Warp is connected. In order to save some time, I've already enrolled my warp. If you watch my previous video, I've explained how to enroll the warp to your Cloudflare tenant. The warp is enrolled to my enterprise Cloudflare Zero Trust account, and the team's name is Trust MyCo. I'm working from home in Wentworthville suburb. I could see the traffic is being forwarded to the closest Cloudflare data center in Sydney. Now what we will do is we'll go back to the browser, google.com. It's working. Now let's go to 777.com. It's blocked. One of the advantage of warp is, as I mentioned earlier, we can apply granular policy. While when you use default location, whether the traffic comes from this public IP or if a user has warp agent, we will apply a flat policy. Now let's say if there's a requirement to assign a specific policy for specific user. Let's see how we can allow gambling website for Giri, because when you have warp agent deployed, actually there are two important benefits, actually three benefits. One, we can identify who the user is, what is the group membership, and we can perform a device posture check like ZTNA score of CrowdStrike, maybe Microsoft Intune compliance, file, registry, process, etc., etc. And the agent will build a encrypted tunnel to the closest Cloudflare data center based on the user location. Now what I'm going to do is, I'll just close this to avoid confusion. I'll create a new policy. I'm going to create a policy, allow gambling for Giri Raj. Content category in gambling, and action is allow. You can integrate with any SAML identity provider such as Entra ID or OAuth or Google IDP, Okta, any well-known SAML or OAuth with Cloudflare. But for this demo, I'm going to use email address. I've used the following email address to enroll the warp agent, and yeah, I'll not enable these options or time-based policy. I'll create a policy. The policies are evaluated from top to down. So probably I'm going to move the allow policy to the top to make sure this policy takes precedence. Remember what I've done is in this policy, if the user is giriraj at mytrust.co.in, I should allow gambling site. So let's go back to the workstation. I'm going to close the browser, open up a new browser. Let's go to google.com. It's allowed. Let's go to 777.com. Let's see what happens. Perfect. It's allowed. And let's go to the command prompt. cmd. I'm going to do a ns lookup for google.com. It's resolving to Google IP. I'm going to do ns lookup for 777.com. It's resolving to the actual IP address of the website. I highly encourage you to visit the Cloudflare developer docs. There are some best practices and policies and examples for each and every policy object is available on the website. And also, if you are a Cisco umbrella or open DNS customer, you can use Cloudflare Zero Trust to get more granular DNS filtering policies to protect your users or network or OT or IoT or even guest Wi-Fi network. Beyond DNS filtering, you can also enforce network policy to protect all ports and protocol. Using the HTTP policies, you can enforce secure web gateway rules, which we'll be seeing in the next demo. And last but not the least, all the transactions can be viewed in the Cloudflare dashboard under logs gateway DNS. If you could see, like, there are two types of transaction. The one generated from a machine without agent does not have the user identity. The one that's generated from a Windows PC, you could see the user ID. And when you look into the logs, you'll see so many parameters like which policy allowed the transaction, what is the resolved IP, which policy allowed the traffic, and what is the policy name, from which location or which DNS filtering was applied to the user, device name, category, source IP, destination IP, etc., etc. All these data can be forwarded to your SAM platform as well. At a high level, you can also identify the top talkers in the Cloudflare dashboard. And this concludes our DNS filtering demo. Thank you.